Shalom. Before I get started, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahawah bahasham, Yahawahshi, bahasham, Rawchaa Qadash. This the brother of Bakala Awalam, here with another hopeful, edifying lesson to the elect body of Yahawah bahasham, Yahawahshi. I got a little video here, I say, in a lot of my videos, I don't have a title. One may come up, but this video I'm about to play, you see that your current standing president Nero, have some words to say about anyone that opposes his ideology of this Make America Great Again, more or less making America Edomite dominant, and in efforts of doing that, he's trying to conceal the factuality of history. And so you can understand what I'm saying, I'm gonna play this video. And basically he's saying that anyone that opposes whatever he's saying, that's not going to be tolerated. And we understand that he's going to issue these unrighteous decrees and policies to make a man an offender for a word, right? So here's this video along with some historical facts that follow after what Trump is saying, right?
You can be loyal to Karl Marx, or you can be loyal to America. You can be loyal to Karl Marx, or you can be loyal to America. You can be a communist, or you can be a patriot. You cannot be both. As for those who peddle Marxist lies about our heritage, who tell our children that we live on stolen land or that our heroes were oppressors, they're doing something much worse than slandering our past. They are slandering and attacking our future. Not going to let that happen.
The Chickasaws, the Choctaws, the Creeks, the Cherokees, they were forcibly dispossessed. Now, clearly, there were many, many forces and attitudes to explain why the banishment of the Indian from his own lands was inevitable. But this was one, a very powerful force, though a harmless-looking thing. This is cotton, young cotton, 3 weeks away from full bloom. When the southern pioneers broke through the mountains and came into these flat lands and the Mississippi Delta beyond, they saw what they wanted their West to look like, an empire of cotton, not a campground for Indian tribes. So the great cotton states, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, they outlawed the tribal kingdoms. And in 1830, Andrew Jackson, who was then president, pushed a bill through Congress ordering that all the Indian tribes, whatever, farmers, hunters, whether they were hostile, peaceable, to be removed west, to the west of the Mississippi. Well, they started to pad away, the Choctaws, the Creeks, the Chickasaws. There was a brave pause when the Cherokee appealed to the Supreme Court, and Chief Justice Marshall ruled they were right. There was no constitutional right to remove them from their ancestral lands. President Jackson said this decision is, and I quote, too preposterous. And in one of the most shameless and possibly the most arbitrary act of an American president, he simply ignored the Supreme Court and he said to the army, get them out. The Chickasaws, the Choctaws.
So you heard that, right? This is historical facts, right? But your current commander-in-chief says he's not going to tolerate basically the truth that's being told about history. That's why he's going to efforts of making laws to ban or tear down like what these black museums and historical artifacts of history of slavery. He's trying to remove it. I think there's a scripture also that tells you about removing landmarks and things like that. Let me see. Landmarks. Yeah, Deuteronomy 19:14, it says, "Thou shalt not remove thy neighbor's landmark, which they of old time have set in thine inheritance, which thou shalt inherit in the land that the Lord thy power giveth thee to possess." Deuteronomy 27:17, it says, "Cursed be he that removeth his neighbor's landmark," and all the people shall say amen, right? Proverbs 22:28, it says, "Remove not the ancient landmark which thy fathers have set." Proverbs 20:23-10, it says, "Remove not the old landmark, and enter not into the fields of the fatherless," right? So there's commandments by Yahawah not to remove like artifacts, historical artifacts of a landmark, So, but he's doing it to basically rewrite history, right? To say like it didn't happen the way it happened. It happened the way I wanted to say it happened, right? He says, going back to what he says, he says those that said we're living on stolen land, which is true, right? You just heard what happened to Andrew with the President Andrew Jackson issued what they call the Indian Removal Act, right? Along with the Trail of Tears, of course. Even with this Christopher Columbus or Cristobal Colon, it was factual. It's understood that they stole this land from the native indigenous population, which basically is the northern tribe, right? They stole it, right? But he's saying that anyone that says that is a liar, basically, and we are not going to tolerate it.
You can be loyal to Karl Marx, or you can be loyal to America. You can be a communist, or you can be a patriot.
So basically, that's these two. You could be a communist or a patriot. These things were said during the civil rights era. These same talking points and same actions that they was doing during the civil rights era, it's happening now, right? So like they was doing protests against wars and things like that. That's current. That's going on now. Even they was had what they call COINTELPRO, surveying black communities, or what they call black leaders. And what was this guy? He was the director of the FBI at that time. His name is escaping me right now, but he issued, there was a saying that he was trying to prevent a black messiah, right? Basically what they call black unity. That's what they was terrified of, right? His last name is Hoover, J. Edgar Hoover. Yeah, that's what his name is, J. Edgar Hoover. He was, they had informants, even so-called Negroes that was infiltrating these black organizations, right? Like the Black Panthers, for example. these different sects of civil rights leaders, even the Islamic Islamic movement, where they had so-called black people joining it, like they did Malcolm X, for example. So these same actions that Esau was doing back then, he's still doing it now, and more so, like, right? So it's still going on. Like, they had white liberals infiltrating black culture also. You see that rampant. That's why a lot of these Negroes are Democrats. It was the same thing they was doing back then. They doing it now. But nonetheless, what he's pointing, he says you can be a patriot or a communist. That's what they was calling Dr. Martin Luther King, which we don't support, but this is for truth or for historical fact that they call him a communist, right? So he's bringing these talking points that you can't be a patriot and a communist at the same time. So if you're saying that this is stolen land and our heroes were oppressors, you a communist, basically a terrorist, and you're an enemy of the state, right? But you see the factuality, which is secular history. It happened. They displaced the Native American tribes and took their lands. If that's not oppression, if that's not stolen, that's not obtaining land unlawfully by theft, and is a form of oppression, what is, right? And it's historical fact. It's nothing made up, right?
You cannot be both. As for those who peddle Marxist lies about our heritage, who tell our children that we live on stolen land or that our heroes were oppressors, they're doing something much worse than slandering our past. They are slandering and attacking our future. Not going to let that happen.
Right? So what he says, he's not going to let that happen. So basically, he's going to put laws into play. These unrighteous decrees, these policies to demonize people that tells the truth.
The Chickasaws, the Choctaws, the Creeks, the Cherokees, they were forcibly dispossessed. Now, clearly, there were many, many forces and attitudes to explain why the banishment of the Indian from his own lands was inevitable. But this was one, a very powerful force, though a harmless-looking thing. This is cotton, young cotton, 3 weeks away from full bloom. When the southern pioneers broke through the mountains and came into these flat lands and the Mississippi Delta beyond, they saw what they wanted their West to look like, an empire of cotton.
So that's what he said when these frontier Edomite colonies came in, they saw what they wanted to see. They saw an empire of cotton. There was a phrase that says cotton is king at one point of time in history. It says cotton is king, right? So they looked at it as planting cotton, and who they displaced it, stole the so-called Indians or Native Americans' lands, displaced them, drove them off further west, right? Which we're going to get into this Indian Removal Act by Andrew Jackson, which that is stolen land, right? That's you stealing someone's land. And the Cherokee tribes took it to the Supreme Court and they agreed. But Andrew Jackson, the president at that time, ignored what he said was unconstitutional. He ignored it and said it was preposterous, and issued the military to drive the Native Americans off, man. So he's gonna do. Trump is gonna basically do the same thing, right? Martial law. He's gonna issue these unrighteous decrees, these policies, executive orders, right, and put these military troops, martial law, which is martial law, into effect in targeting people. There's nothing new under the sun. Esau was doing this before. He's going to do it again.
Not a campground for Indian tribes. So the great cotton states, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, They outlawed the tribal kingdoms. And in 1830, Andrew Jackson, who was then president, pushed a bill through Congress ordering...
He pushed the bill through Congress, right? Unrighteous decree.
That all the Indian tribes, whatever, farmers, hunters, whether they were hostile, peaceable, to be removed to the west of the Mississippi.
Right, to the west of the Mississippi, what it says in Isaiah chapter 10. I think it's Isaiah chapter 10. It says, woe unto them that decree unrighteous decrees, and that write grievousness which they have prescribed, to turn aside the needy from judgment, and to take away the right from the poor of my people. Right, he took away your rights, right? That widows may be their prey, and that they may rob the fatherless, right? So took away your rights. He said, I'm taking away your land. He said it's preposterous. You know, right? So basically, Donald Trump is saying the same thing. This is preposterous. You saying that we stole your land. This is stolen land, and our heroes are oppressors. This is preposterous, but this is fact, historical fact. And he's going to do the same thing that basically Andrew Jackson did. You know, he's going to issue unrighteous decrees and use the military as his might. As another one says, might be Malachi chapter, right. It's the book of Malachi chapter 2 and 1. It says, woe to them that devise iniquity and work evil upon their beds. When the morning is light, they practice it, because it is in the power of their hand, right? So these laws, man, they put it to work. In the morning, you know, they practice it. They put these laws into practice, right? Verse 2, and they covet fields and take them by violence, and houses and take them away, so they may oppress a man in his house, even a man in his heritage. So that's what it's doing, man. You're oppressing a man in his house. It's taking a man's field, his houses away. That's oppression. We just read it, right? So Andrew Jackson, through the Indian Removal Act, that was a form of oppression, right? He took these native tribes and drove them westward, right? What is it? Trail of Tears, right? They drove. They even teach you that in history, right? In secular history, in school, you learn about the Trail of Tears in school. So now he's saying that that never happened, right? That's not oppression, right? We didn't steal any lands, right? But what the Trail of Tears is all about.
You can be loyal to Karl Marx, or you can be loyal to America. You can be a communist, or you can be a patriot. You cannot be both. As for those who peddle Marxist lies about our heritage, who tell our children that we live on stolen land or that our heroes were oppressors, they're doing something much worse than slandering our past. They are slandering and attacking our future. Not going to let that happen.
So we're not slandering no one. You are the slanderer, Esau, Edom. Esau is the slanderer. Devil, that's what the devil means. Devil means slanderer, false accuser. And that's what he's doing, right? He's slandering the truth. And that's basically what he's going to do ultimately, because he's the devil. And like I said, you look up the word devil, the devil means false accuser, slanderer, right? And that's what he's doing.
Chickasaws, the Choctaws, the Creeks, the Cherokees, they were forcibly dispossessed. Now, clearly, there were many, many forces and attitudes to explain why the banishment of the Indian from his own lands was inevitable. But this was one, a very powerful force, though a harmless-looking thing. This is cotton, young cotton, 3 weeks away from full bloom. When the southern pioneers broke through the mountains and came into these flat lands and the Mississippi Delta beyond, they saw what they wanted their West to look like, an empire of cotton, not a campground for Indian tribes. So the great cotton states, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, they outlawed the tribal kingdoms. And in 1830, Andrew Jackson, who was then president, pushed a bill through Congress ordering that all the Indian tribes, whatever, farmers, hunters, whether they were hostile, peaceable, to be removed west, to the west of the Mississippi. Well, they started to pad away, the Choctaws, the Creeks, the Chickasaws. There was a brave pause when the Cherokee appealed to the Supreme Court, and Chief Justice Marshall ruled they were right. There was no constitutional right to remove them from their ancestral lands. President Jackson said this decision is, and I quote, too preposterous. And in one of the most shameless and possibly the most arbitrary act of an American president, he simply ignored the Supreme Court and he said to the army, get them out. The Chickasaws, the Choctaws.
Wow. Said to the army, that's true, man. That's fact. He's not standing up there lying, making anything up. This is another so-called white man telling you this. And this is facts, man. So we just read that. What is that? That's oppression. Micah chapter 2 and 1. It says, woe to them that devise iniquity and work evil upon their beds. When the morning is light, they practice it, because it is in the power of their hand. They covet fields and take them by violence. Right? He issued the military. He says that's preposterous. He told the military to get them out. He took the fields and he coveted their fields. Covet means taking something that doesn't belong to you, wanting something that doesn't belong to you. That's what covet means, right? You want something that doesn't belong to you. So he wanted their fields, right? So they seen these Indian territories as cotton empires, right? They displaced the Native Americans and then had the so-called Negroes, the Southern tribe, come in and pick the cotton, basically, right? They seen they took their fields by violence. He issued the military in, right? Verse 2, it says, and they covet fields and take them by violence, and houses and take them away. So they oppress a man in his house, even a man in his heritage, right? So that's what that is, man. That's oppression. But he's saying, your current commander-in-chief said, that is not oppression. That is not, that didn't happen. We didn't oppress or take anyone's lands. Our heroes, our presidents, our forefathers are heroes, right? We didn't oppress anyone. He's a liar, man. And he's calling whoever's exposing the truth. He's calling you a slanderer, which that's what he is. Now look at this example. Even now, we're gonna go to Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson, right? This is history. Google it, right? It says signed into law by U.S. President Andrew Jackson on May 28th, 1830, the Indian Removal Act of 1830, authorized the president to negotiate treaties exchanging Native American tribal lands in the east for federal territories west of the Mississippi River. The act paved the way for forced displacement of tens of thousands of Native Americans. That was forced displacement. So what is that? What that means, man? Forced displacement. They stole their land. We just read that out of Micah chapter 2. Right? Micah chapter 2 verse 2. Right? That's theft. You stole your land. Forced displacement. That means you took these people's lands. There's nobody defaming or slandering There's no slander here. This is fact. This is factual, man. Right? This is facts that happened in America. The legislation was largely driven by an increasing demand for fertile farmland and the discovery of gold, particularly within territories inhabited by 5 civilized tribes, right? The Cherokee, Chickasaw, and Seminole, right? In the American South, while the act was framed by the Andrew Jackson administration as a policy for voluntary relocation, it proved the funding and legal framework that his administration used pressure, bribe, and eventually force tribes to vacate their ancestral homelands. So what is that, man? The Trail of Tears, right? The consequences of the act led directly to the infamous Trail of Tears, right? Despite the Cherokee Nation winning a Supreme Court case affirming their sovereign land rights in Georgia, Jackson largely ignored the ruling. During the subsequent military-led relocations, over 4,000 to 6,000 Cherokee alone died of cold, disease, and starvation during this forced march to present-day Oklahoma. So yeah, the Trail of Tears, man. The Indian Removal Act. They teach you this in history. I remember going over this in history class. So this is not slander. Where is it? How is that slandering? Right? How is that slandering? Now going back to this guy here, right? Christopher Columbus, right? This is Google AI overview, right? Google is telling you, even Google is telling you this, right? It says the arrival of Christopher Columbus in 1492 initiated a devastating period of colonialism, land dispossession, and systematic violence, right? Land dispossession, man. Land that's stolen. Land dispossession. Land dispossession is a systematic removal of individuals, communities, or indigenous nations for their land, homes, or territory. Now let's read that again out of Micah chapter 2 and 1 again. It says, woe to them that devise iniquity. Woe meaning destruction, misery, right? That's what's coming. Destruction and misery, right? Woe to them that devise iniquity and work evil upon their beds. When the morning is light, they practice it because it is in the power of their hand, right? They stay up all night coming up with these bills and legislation, man. Writing these bills and legislation. They tell you that even in your news. They tell you, oh, the Trump administration, the Biden administration, they was up all the weary hours of the night trying to pass these bills and this, that, and third. That's what it's talking about. They even within the late hours of the night to the wee hours in the morning, they come up to pass these bills, man. That's what it's talking about there. Woe to them that devise iniquity and work evil upon their beds. When the morning is light, they practice it because it is in the power of their hand, right? They spending all night coming up with these bills and laws and unrighteous decrees, right? And policies. And they covet fields and take them away by violence, and houses and take them away. So they oppress a man in his house, even a man in his heritage, right? It says, do not remove the ancient landmarks, right? You're removing these people's ancestral heritage. You're taking away their houses, their fields. You're oppressing them, right? That's what the scripture says. That's oppression, man. but your current commander-in-chief says it's not, that never happened, and whoever says it is a slanderer, right? But it's secular history. So that's this land displacement. We just read land displacement out of the book of Micah, chapter 2, verse 2, right? The arrival of Christopher Columbus in 1492 initiated a devastating period of colonialism, land dispossession, and systematic violence against the indigenous people of the Americas. Historical records confirmed that Columbus claimed ancestral lands for the Spanish crown, enslaved native population, and extracted resources through brutal forced labor. Right. So this is historical record confirms that Columbus claimed his ancestral lands for the Spanish crown. So he claimed these lands for the Spanish crown, man, enslaved native population. That's oppression, man. Right? Land theft, oppression, and extracted resources through brutal force, slavery. That's oppression, man. So where's the slander at, right? There's no slander, man. Esau, you found out you're the wicked. And that's what these devils was gonna do. They are the slanderer. They're gonna they're gonna come up with laws like Andrew Jackson did, right? And you use the military and make a man an offender for a word. Here's a list. 12 U.S. presidents owned slaves at some point of time in their lives, with 8 of them holding enslaved people while in office, right? So they said, cotton is king. They saw these native lands as cash crop of cotton, free labor, displacing the Native Americans, which is the northern kingdom, the Israelites, and putting the southern kingdom predominantly to plant and harvest and reap their fields, right? Which is the southern kingdom, right? That's basically what they did, right? And that's oppression, man. Theft and oppression. So where's the slander? That's not slander, man. And your heroes own slaves. That's oppression. These heroes, your founding fathers, your presidents, they own slaves, man. This is historical fact, right? 12 U.S. presidents own slaves at some point in their lives, with 8 of them holding enslaved people while in office. The list of presidents who own slave people includes George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, James Monroe, Andrew Jackson, right? Martin Van Buren, William Henry Harrison, John Taylor, James K. Polk, Zachary Taylor, Andrew Johnson, Ulysses S. Grant, however you say his name. So these 12 presidents that own slaves, that's oppression, man. Right? So they saw these lands of the Native Americans as a way to make money. Cotton is king. Right? And there was a point of time that particular time for that matter, cotton was king, right? And they displaced the native indigenous people, took their lands, and then had the so-called Negro slaves to plant, harvest, reap their fields, with the cotton or whatever else they was planting, right? So that's oppression, man. Theft, land theft, and oppression. So where is the slander? This is history that's known. Even the Willie Lynch letter, right? These are talking points, right? Which, I'm gonna just read this, right? It says the Willie Lynch letter is a speech purportedly written in 1712, details a strategy for controlling enslaved population by intentionally pitting them against one another, including setting the young against the old and the dark-skinned individuals against the lighter-skinned individuals, right? And the gender thing too, male against female. And that's going on today. That still goes on today, right? He says, however, historians and scholars such as those at the Jim Crow Museum widely regard the document as a modern hoax. Right now, this was something that's happened, man. I mean, this was real. The speech contains historical inaccuracy in terms like indoctrination that did not exist in the 18th century, right? Despite being recognized as a fabrication, the themes outlined in the letter are frequently used in cultural and sociological discussions and sociological discussions to analyze real world issues like colorism and generational divides. Right, so these points that they said about putting the so-called Negro people one against another, it's still happening today, man. You can see it if you have eyes to see. They're putting the young against the old, right? The dark skin against the light skin, right? The male against the female. This is happening. This is obviously happening, man. The Willie Lynch letter is something that was real. It's about your President Trump, right? So this is what he intended to do. His intentions was to remove or defund black historical museums, right? And take down artifacts to hide the truth, basically to rewrite history, what they call critical race theory. They're trying to say these things didn't occur, and they're going to rewrite history to make them seem like they're the good guys like they do in these movies. A lot of these movies, they portray Esau Edom as the good guy, and he's trying to really do that for real, right? You see a lot of these movies, which is fabrication and lies, and he's trying to paint himself as the good guy because his feelings is hurt, right? And that's how Esau Edom, he conduct things based upon his feelings, right? He do things according to how, his feelings, and that's not being a wise ruler. He says President Trump's effort, all of us, everybody has feelings, but you got to have a balance. You got to have wisdom, right? You got to have wisdom, and you only get that from Yahawah, bahasham, Yahawahshi, right? This it says President Trump efforts to alter historical and cultural narratives are rooted in his executive order titled Restoring Truth and Sanity to American History, right? That's these unrighteous decrees, man. They write grievousness which they prescribe, right? When the morning is light, they practice it. That's these executive orders, man. Restoring truth and sanity to American history. This directive instructs the National Park Service and Smithsonian institutions to remove or revise exhibits that the administration claims inappropriately disparage Americans' America's past, right? The administration action spanned multiple federal sites, museums, and historical records. It says the President's House exhibit in Philadelphia. The administration removed exhibit panels detailing the lives and brutal conditions of 9 enslaved people held by George Washington at this historic site, right? So, like, you see what he said. He said, hey, our heroes, meaning their presidents, did not oppress anyone, but they owned slaves, man. 12 presidents owned slaves. George Washington is one, right? He owned slaves even while in office, right? So that's oppression, man. But that's not slandering anyone. We're not slandering anyone by revealing the facts of history. Following a city lawsuit, a federal appeals court cleared the way for the administration to permanently replace the slavery displays with narratives that emphasize Washington's discomfort with the institution. Smithsonian Institution targets the White House Domestic Policy Council released a scathing 162-page report accusing the National Museum of American History and National Museum of African American History and Culture of extreme political political activism. So shit. The report challenges exhibitions highlighting systematic racism and the dark reality of slavery, demanding their focus instead of uplifting historical achievements. Right. So yeah, man, you got to expose the whole fact, expose what happened. Yeah, it was a dark time in history, and it needs to be revealed and taught, because they got a saying out there, those that don't know history, you're deemed to repeat it, right? So that's basically what they want to happen again. I know this guy was saying that. That's the reason why I seen a video. Somebody even saying that particular point. That's the whole reason why he's trying to do away with the history, because they want to repeat it. Meaning what? They want to put you back in slavery. That's why they got talks of Jim Crow laws coming back in effect in Mississippi and things like that. You know, they're trying to reinstate Jim Crow laws, man, because they don't want you to think it didn't happen. No, it didn't happen. Slavery didn't happen. You know, Jim Crow didn't happen. You know, they want to rewrite history to basically relive history, right? They want it to happen again. So that's enough of that, man. You know, I'm gonna just go to this posting right here.
All over the world in Philadelphia to learn about.
Yeah, I'm gonna go to this video, man, and like I said, there's no slander in that. This is history, right? This reaction after appeals court ruling allowed changes to President's House exhibits. Right, that's
About the history of America.
Even Andrew Jackson, even the native tribes, the Cherokees, went to the Supreme Court and won, and said that it was unconstitutional for them to displace the Native Americans off their land. Right, it was illegal. It's unconstitutional. What did the president at that time, Andrew Jackson, did? He said it was preposterous. Wrote a law into Congress and used the military to force the Native Americans westward, which is the Indian Removal Act, which led to the Trail of Tears. What you know is the Trail of Tears, and they teach you that even in school to this day. Well, that was teaching it when I grew up, when I was in school. So I'm not too sure if they still teaching it now, but they was teaching it when I was in school, right? So that's not slander.
America.
To understand the culture and the history of U.S., that's fantastic.
Some of that history, though, is missing, as panels telling the stories of the 9 people enslaved by George Washington were taken down from the president's house earlier this year after an order by the Trump administration. Philadelphia sued and won. Crews restored about half of the panels before an appeal by the Trump administration halted the reinstallation. Now a federal appeals court has ruled that the Trump administration does have the right to remove all panels and change the stories that are told here.
That's really sad. I mean, it's an erasure of really important history.
The Third Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that the lower district court here in Philadelphia does not have jurisdiction in the case. It also ruled that the site of the president's house belongs to the National Park Service, not the city of Philadelphia. Disappointing news for organizations who had been fighting for the panels to stay. Avenging the Ancestors Coalition is reviewing the court's decision and weighing its options, saying in a statement to Action News, quote, "This is definitely not the end of this fight, nor does it diminish the importance of ensuring that the full truth of our nation's history is preserved and presented accurately." Visitors from around the world also voicing their opinions.
In Brazil, we had history of slavery also, and I think it's important to show for the younger generation.
As this historic site could soon change the way that history is told.
I think it's important that we see all of history, the good and the bad.
So yeah, like you said, the good and the bad, man. So it's just factual history. Where's the slander, man? But you know, that's what Esau does, man. You know, that's what Esau does, man. You know, he's trying to make it seem like he's not doing anything wrong. No, he's not the bad guy. I'm not the bad guy here. I'm not the criminal. I'm not doing anything wrong, man. You are doing something wrong. You're the criminal, right? You're the one that's breaking the law, because you write these unrighteous decrees. Now you become an offender, right? Isaiah 29:20. It says, "For the terrible one is brought to naught, and the scorner is consumed, and all that watch for iniquity is cut off. That make a man an offender for a word, and lay a snare for him that reproveth in the gate, and turn aside the just for a thing of naught." Right. So that's what Esau is doing, man. That's what his intentions is. But he's gonna get cut off, man. By Yahawah, bahasham, Yahawahshi. I'm gonna get it out the blue letter, right? Isaiah 29:20. He's gonna get cut off, man. Isaiah 29:20 at the Amplified, right? It says, "For the tyrant will come to an end, and the scorner will be finished. Indeed, all who are intent on doing evil will be cut off. Those who cause a person to be condemned with a false word, and lay a trap for him who upholds justice at the city gate, and defraud the one in the right with meaningless arguments." So yeah, that's what these devils do, man. The arguments is for what they call in law in legal term, a law term, fictitious, man. That's meaningless arguments. But Esau will brush it off because he's puffing. That's what he's doing. He puffeth at you, man. Like, what you gonna do? You know, that's what that is. What you gonna do? You can't do nothing to me. I rule this. I run this here. So that's what this Esau's doing. He's puffing at his enemies, was you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. You are the enemy of this. Esau is your enemy, man. Right? And he knows that, right? From these elites. They know that. So he's puffing at the children of Israel, like, what you gonna do? Psalms 12 and 5, it says, for the oppression of the poor, right? He's an oppressor, man. For the oppression of the poor and for the sigh of the needy, now will I arise, saith the Lord Yahawah. I will set him in safety from him that puffeth at him, right? So that's what these devils doing, man. You know, you go into this word puffeth, what it means, puffeth. It says to breathe, right? To breathe out, utter, right? He's speaking. He puffing. He's speaking these words, man. This legislation, right? To utter, to kindle a fire, to scoff, blow upon, to break, puff, bring it to a snare, speak, utter. So basically, he's doing it. He's uttering through his legislation, right? It says to breathe, to blow. It says incite sedition, right? Figuratively, to blow to other as lies, right? To utter lies, right? To rail against anyone. So that's what he's doing, man. The oppress, reproach, whom they to rail against anyone, followed by, and whom they reproach. An example, the oppressed. So he's oppressing you, which when he's uttering lies. What it says in Psalm 73. The book of Psalm 73 and 8. It says, they are corrupt. They speak wickedly concerning oppression. They speak lawfully. Right. So that's these people, man. They're puffing at you. They speaking wickedly. They speaking lies concerning oppression. Right. They are corrupt. They speak wickedly concerning oppression. They speak lawfully. Right. That's Esau. Go to the New Living Translation. It says they scoff and speak only evil. In their pride, they seek to crush others. Right? Amplified says they mock and wickedly speak of oppression. They speak lawfully with malice. Right? So that's Esau, man. That's what he's doing. He's puffing at you. He's speaking lies and reproaching you, saying you are the slander. This didn't happen. Right? There was no theft. You know, there was no land theft. What is the Indian Removal Act? What was the Trail of Tears about, for example? Right? There was 12 presidents that owned slaves. What is that? That's oppression, right? They are corrupt. They speak wickedly concerning oppression. They speak lawfully, right? Let me do another precept. This is Psalms 10, Psalms 10 and 7, man. So that's Esau, man. You know, he's making you think that he's not doing anything wrong because he's fooling you, he's deceiving you, and then he's turning around and saying the ones that are in the right, right? You're the one that's doing wrong, right? You the ones that's exposing corruption and seeking justice, right? And exposing his error. You become the offender. Now you become the criminal because he's gonna pass legislation to demonize any ones that speak truth, right? Psalms 10 and Psalms chapter 10 and 7, it says his mouth is full of cursing and deceit and fraud. Under his tongue is mischief and vanity. Right? Esau, man. He sitteth in the lurking places of the villages. In the secret places doeth he murder the innocent. His eyes are privily set against the poor. He lieth in wait secretly as a lion in his den. He lieth in wait to catch the poor. He doeth catches the poor when he draweth him into his net. Right, so he set up a trap, man. That's what the devils do. He set up snares. He set a snare and for him that reproveth in the gate. Right, we read it out of Isaiah chapter 29, and I think it's 29 and 20. Right, 29 to 21. That's what this devil do, man. He set up a snare for him that reproveth in the gate. These devils gonna set up snares and traps. You know, just like Andrew Jackson did. He used the military. He's gonna do the same thing now. He's gonna do the same thing again. Esau's gonna do the same thing again. He's gonna use the military, martial law, which is his sword, to slay whoever he deems he needs to, that opposeth this new world order. You know, he's going to make a man an offender for a word. Those that speak out against this corruption and this wickedness of the ruling class, you're going to be deemed the enemy. You're going to be deemed the target, right? So I'm going to end it off there. I hope it was edifying to the elect. But we got to understand Yahawah has his elect. You know, that's why we should pray to Yahawah. You know, keep the faith. And we don't have anything to worry about. We're just informing you that this is what this devil is gonna do. This is what Esau is gonna do. He a liar, man. He's a deceiver. He's the slanderer, right? And he's gonna flip the script and try to say anyone that speak against whatever I'm pushing, you're a criminal. And that's what this devil is gonna do. He's gonna come down with the sword, like it says in Revelation chapter 2 and 9. I'm probably gonna end it off with that. Revelation chapter 2 and 10. No, it's not. It's not chapter 2 and 10. It's chapter 12 and 12. Revelation 12 and 12. So like it says, rejoice. Revelation chapter 12 and 12. It says, therefore rejoice, ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea, for the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, because he knoweth he have but a short time. Right, the devil, the slanderer, is coming down with great wrath because his time is short. So he's in desperation mode, and he's gonna make anybody he needs to be seen as a criminal, a terrorist, a communist, enemy of the state, or whatever he says, man. Because his time is short, so he's in desperation mode. And you don't get down with the program, he's going to slay you, right? That's his intentions anyway, but the elect is going to be redeemed. He's going to redeem and have salvation in these times through the faith and works and faith of Yahawah bahasham Yahawahshi. So I'm gonna end it off there. I hope it was edifying to the elect. I'm gonna say call halayim la, Yahawah bahasham Yahawahshi bahasham Rawchaa Qadash. Shalom to the next time Yahawah Rawchaa, which means Lord willing. Why abba babal.